Never sleep nights. The Terror. Randall's eyes awake to the sight of a gleaming sunlight that shone amazing rays into his room, the shutterless windows allowing the smell and heat of summer to welcome him on his day ahead. The sound of the small town was coming alive to his ears. The buzz of distant haggling and commotion, as well as the slow clop of mules and horses intertwined with the rolling sounds of carts. The bell of the Greenwichian church by the coast was ringing, the calling to a weekend noon prayer. Rubbing his eyes from sleep and getting out of his bed with a spring to his step, he could not help but smile as he looked at the coastal town below from his home. He looked behind him where, from across the room, there was a shoddy cot, little more than a crate with furs and hay, where his little baby sister Kerrigan slept soundly. He knew his little brother, only 7 years younger than he, would be gone at this time. He was learning the novel scholarly arts with a recently built school outside the town. He heard his father knock on the door, urging him to get up and have some breakfast that his mother had made. Randall just needed a moment. Yes, a moment was all he wanted, and he could not help but smile, for, though he knew not what specifically it was, he did know it was a special day ahead. He, of course, ignored the gigantic black spider that lay stretched out on the wall to his left. He could just see it, eyeing him from his periphery, watching him, and always ready. But he had seen it before. He always saw it at this time. Yeah, Dad, I know, I'm coming. Just give me a couple of...
Open the door, Randall.
Randall's blood froze to ice. He knew that voice. She shouldn't be here. It was not her time. Once more his eyes flickered to the door, praying to hear his father's voice again. And then he looked to the floor and felt his blood run cold as he saw another person's blood seeping across the floor from behind it.
Randall, open the door.
Randall swallowed and trembled like a leaf as he saw the town streets had turned into an entirely different place. It was familiar, but Randall knew not from where he'd seen it. The giant spider, like a hungry wolf, finally scuttles away from the wall, out the window and sped into the desert, looking about wildly, almost savoring the sight, dancing at the desolation. A desert landscape, ruins of Punic buildings, abandoned trebuchets, and a field of slaughter beneath a red sky and a scorching sun. Men he knew called out his name, brothers of steel, hardened men who he knew not, but like the voice behind the door, he would in time. They crawled like babes about the ruins with spears in their bellies and axes in their heads, crawling towards Randall, cursing him, begging him, screaming for him. His sister behind him screamed louder, and fear, anger, panic, and pure dread consumed him.
You know what happens if you don't. Randall, open the door, now!
his face a mask of sweat as he looked around the large domed room hewn from stone and clay, clad with vines and adorned with shelves filled with tomes and scrolls. By his small single bed from which he sat was a sturdy oak writing desk and a simple chair with a simple fur mat, and at the other side of his bed was a fireplace with dying embers. Atop the desk was a clay jug of fresh water from the stream in Osmund's grove outside, along with a wooden cup filled with the crushed nightberry juice to help him sleep after the painful removal of his corroded poisoned skin from days past. He looked at his left arm and chest after calming himself from his nightmare, and found the skin red and raw, but not a trace of the infection anywhere. Randall sighed in relief, for now he felt he was well and truly cured. From fear came a rising anger. This was the third vivid nightmare he'd had now since staying at the Grove. Osmund had assured him it was the effects of the nightberry and the poisonous concoction working together, causing aberrant nightmares, and despite Randall's protestations, Osmund had promised that after the surgical removal of the poisoned skin, he would not need to even stay in the Grove any longer. But the nightberry was essential for the healing process. It was either herbs or magic, and since Randall had a distrust of the arcane in general, he reluctantly chose the former, suffering another night of horrific dreams. And yet Randall had been cautious last night. Alone in his room after the painful evening of the infected skin removal, he took only half of the recommended dose. With half the amount of the berry, he'd suffered twice the night scares, which left him exhausted and fearful. Getting out of bed, he got dressed, his arm and chest feeling better than ever. He walked over to the heavy door of the study to find Osmund. The Grove of Osmund was a beautiful hidden part of the Mudlands that resided close to a river that flowed to the Polar Sea. As far as Randall knew, it had been discovered, designed, decorated and maintained all by the lonesome druid Osmund. From the outside, a passing traveller would not notice the grove, for it was hidden by great natural stone hills, protected by a thicket of heavy trees and bushes. Its one entrance, of which Randall knew, was a wooden gate covered thickly with vines and plants, thus disguising it. Past the gate, one would notice a small simple path going downwards in an S shape. On the left side was a steep stone hillside, flanked with trees and shrubbery, the larger crevices in the hills being natural caves that the druid had converted into more useful and accommodating rooms, such as a study, a lab, a garden for nocturnal plants, and of course, personal rest and storage. On the left-hand side of the path was simply a steep grassy slope, where at the bottom was a stream, a pond, a stone courtyard, as well as some benches, crates, carts, and druidic monuments carved from wood or stone in the shape of deers, bears, or wolves, most of which were still in construction. At the top of the hillside, stone totems would be seen facing outwards, away from the grove, somewhat defensively. Randall did not know much about sorcerers, even less so regarding druids, but he suspected they may be protective wards to defend the grove from whatever lurked in the Mudland woods just beyond. Why this kindly, sagely druid had decided to establish a grove near such a dangerous place was beyond him. As Randall stepped out, he saw the sky turning a darker shade of grey. Was it evening already? Or dark dawn? How long had he slept this time? Osmund had warned him the nightberry would induce prolonged slumber, but Randall had rested 3 days too long since the event at the Grimshaw coast against the Ogre. Osmund had been a good host for Randall, and knowing Randall's discomfort with magic, He had offered him a choice between the arcane or the herbal cure, the latter being a much longer process, but Randall had accepted that anyway. The process of removing the poison, surgically removing the necrotic skin and healing, had taken 3 days. Over that time, Randall had noticed a discontent about the druid. His once kindly smile and demeanor grew faint, hiding a troubled mind. But perhaps matters more than Randall's comprehension addled Osmund's mind, and so he didn't trouble himself in asking the druid. Closing the door behind him and slowly walking towards the other end of the path, he glanced down to see Osmund slowly watering a blackberry tree, with a small pine marten resting on his shoulder, its eyes fixed on the juicy fruit of the tree the druid was watering. Randall made his way down the path until Osmund paid him with a wave.
Randall, my lad, how are you feeling?
Restless. Damn it, man, I suffered another one of those nightmares. Where on earth do you grow these accursed berries? Norcia? It's time I set off. I yearn for home more than ever. But no disrespect to yours. It's been a good place to rest.
But it's nearly nightfall. A few more hours and it's midnight.
Nightfall? Damn it all. I didn't know it was that late. How close to the nearest settlement from here?
The nearest one is a village called Rorpal. It's a day's walk from here. Rorpal. They make some excellent bread over there. Yes. I had placed way signs for the sick and needy of that village to find my grove. But though I needn't have to warn a wandering swordsman about the perils of night travel, especially close to the mudlands, it wouldn't harm you at all to stay another night, you know.
I appreciate the offer, druid, and I have enjoyed your company. But it's time I'm off. I'm feeling fine now.
But surely it'd be better to leave come the morning.
I'll take my chances. Where's my belongings?
Oh, they're in the cart. Over there, inside the crate. Should only be the one. Oh, you look haggard, my lad. I insist. That arm is freshly cured, but it'll need rest for the outer layer to regrow, so another night with some nightberries to quicken the healing, and you'll be...
Damn it, druid, with your nightberries. 3 nights I've eaten those fruits, and I awaken with a fear and sweat of a coward on the front lines. Every night they worsen. First night I hear screams of the damned. Next night I dream of a slain nemesis come to torment me. And last night I... Never mind. And then there's this spider. Always there, always watching. I know not what it means. Look, I've taken these berries in the past. I know their uses, and not once have I experienced even a vision after taking them. So tell me this, Osmund. Why are those nightberries doing this, and why are you so eager for me not to leave?
You are free to leave, my dear fellow, though I would advise you do not. You cannot leave this night. No, it's not safe.
Why? What's out there that I cannot face? Bandits? More ogres?
Nay. Sit down, my lad. I will tell you all. The night berries don't cause nightmares. After the first night of your treatment, you never truly needed them to rest, but I gave you them anyway.
Why?
On the first day here, as you rested with the nightberry, you heard screams in the night. I did too. That was no dream induced by the nightberry. Oh, no. No, those screams were real, and loud enough to have pierced your ears under the influence of the nightberry. And it came from within the Mudland woods. On the following morning, I enacted a ritual to help me speak to the nearby beasts who were willing to tell me what had happened last night. There was none but a jittery toad who told me what had happened. For even the animals, even they had been affected by what had happened that night. tribe of primitive folk had been victim to something that had crept from the deep and the darkest part of the forest. The toad knew not, for he had shook and wept at what he had witnessed. And with that he leapt away in a panic. Well, I took to my study, and while you rested, I searched my tomes for what kind of beast that dwelt in the mudlands would do this. But, alas, nothing came of it. The next night I ventured out of the grove. Aye, but, Randall, there was a forlorn feeling about the wood. In that abysmal darkness within the mudlands, a moth guided me further into the woods, yet even she was afraid for what we'd find. She led me to a swamp in the heart of Mudland Wood, where after I had shed some light with my staff, I saw rafts that went over the murky waters, and homes were carved into tree trunks or banks. Oh, bodies littered the waters, pale and green-skinned painted folk, men, women, children. Mothers had strangled daughters as sons had slaughtered fathers. It was carnage. Madness. Then I too felt it. Though I was awake, I felt the presence of someone trying to pierce my mind. Suddenly I felt memories of shame and fear, memories from my youth, emerge to the front of my thought. And someone was changing them, making those memories more exaggerated, fueling them with emotions anew as though they had happened just yesterday. I wanted to lash out, or to weep. But nay, before it could enchant me to madness, I angrily touched a tree, and with a heavy spell I travelled the roots away from the village. Next morn I was so drained from using such power so quickly. The thoughts died as I reached the grove, praying that the wards above would grant protection to whatever evil was out there. But when you awoke and told me of the terrifying dream you'd had, I knew now that this creature was no spirit or fiend, but had to be a fae of some sort. Hitherto this morning I knew not what this creature specifically was, but through the night I began to feel a niggling in my mind. I fear the murderer may have chased me to here.
What is it?
What I think it is? Well, local scholars of old called them the Shin, or in the common tongue, the Terrors. 1,000 years ago, before the 12 prophets left the Maker's side to end the Age of Blood, tyrant rulers would have their pet wizard conjure a creature from the penultimate gate of hell, a creature that fed upon nightmares.
What on earth for?
Oh, oppression breeds rebellion, Randall, and rebellion was ubiquitous in those faithless centuries. Upstart lords and would-be kings schemed endlessly against their overlords. Most rulers would send armies or plot murder to quell the rebels, but for the more powerful, why exhaust an army when instead you can summon one beast from beyond who could do the job just as well, if not better? It's a nocturnal thing that feeds off a victim's mind and the emotions behind every memory. They relish defiling thoughts with nightmares induced by them, and these visions become so real to their victim that when they wake up, they'll be a paranoid, hateful, and violent person. Their dreams become reality.
I've never heard of these terrors, but everyone knows when the 12 prophets descended and ended the Age of Blood, the conjured monsters were also extinct, or at least very few remained. But if you're right, why is it still here?
I'm not sure. It's a creature so abhorrent and ancient that I'm not even sure if it is the very same thing that now prowls nearby. But it is the closest conclusion I can gather. Now you see, my dear fellow, why risking a sprint in the night would be folly. I'm sorry I was not forthcoming. I did not wish to alarm you, and to be honest, I expected you awake on your way by dawn. But fear not. I have spent the last few days carving and enchanting wards to protect the grove. I pray it works. For if I am correct, we are dealing with a hellspawn.
All right. One more night at the grove, then. I'm gonna guess the nightberry somewhat suppresses its powers, then?
Yes, I was. You have just been recovering from a deadly duel against a spirit-enthralled ogre in enchanted armor while dying of poison. I did not wish to worry you about another problem. I would have rather let you leave in the morning, ignorant. But alas, the nightberry was not as strong as I had hoped, and since I, too, have been feeling my mind roll with suppressed fears, I suspect it must be close. Too close.
No, nor will I be taking any more nightberry. I have slept too long, and I cannot bear another nightmare. If this creature feeds off my dread, then tonight it will starve. The more I slept, the more real these dreams felt, the more empty I have been feeling inside. Whatever it is, should it come tonight, we will face it, right? The druid was silent at first, contemplating his own decision, stroking his chin as the pine marten on his shoulder nibbled on some stolen blackberry, also looking inquisitively at Osmund, as if also awaiting his decision. At last he stood up with a raised finger from his seat by the tree and walked swiftly into a room carved within the rock nearby. Confused and feeling slightly awkward, Randall paced about closer to the table before the seat, idly looking about it, until Osmund came back, grunting, as in his arms he held a variety of weapons familiar to Randall. It was the enchanted weapons wielded by the ogre he'd fought, all except the greatsword, which admittedly would be too big for even the strongest man to use. He dropped them on the table before Randall, flail, longsword, and mace, all dark or black with gold-lined patterns.
I gathered these 2 days ago, when I went to cleanse that horrid cove. I cast a ritual to identify them. They aren't cursed, thankfully, and they still possess a powerful enchantment. They cannot be dulled, no matter how much you use them. They can also shatter metal armor better than usual weapons.
Didn't take you for the martial type.
Oh, they're not for me.
I don't use magic. I don't trust it. It's unstable, unknown, and often leads to someone getting cursed. Why do I need an ogre's weapon to defend against this creature?
The terror is said to be a fae from hell. It cannot be killed properly by mortal blades made from the earth. An enchanted strike will deliver its soul back to its realm for good, I believe. Where the people who dwell there no doubt deserve it far better than we do.
I really hate magic. Fine, I'll take the mace. Darkness fell on the land, but the grove was illuminated with brazier fire and candlelight. The land had grown quiet, and the wind blew silently above. Together, he and the druid had prepared defences for the grove. Randall, being ever the more materialist, had set up basic hunting traps around the grove and at the entrance. This creature may be from another world, it seemed, but it was still a beast, Randall reasoned. Osmund had spoken to the animals who ventured into his grove to be wary and stay within the grove for the night, where they had gratefully obliged. Osmund had been alarmed at how few creatures had been around. Other than the pine marten, there was a fox, a toad, and by sheer luck a deer, all of whom kept their distance from one another and wandered pensively about. Randall was no druid, but he swore he could sense pure anxiety from all the creatures, despite the wards. The fox particularly looked terrified, its green eyes haunted. What dark things happened in the Mudland Woods to make even vermin shudder? He'd also set up 6 new wards, simple stones carven into crude cuboids with druidic warding runes. They were placed at the top of the hills that surrounded the grove, the druidic symbols facing outwards. Osmund had been working on them every morning after the slaughter he'd witnessed in the Mudland Woods, and swore it would protect against fey or fiend intruders. Randall now sat by the stream, by a large mossy rock, now donned in his usual leather armour and cloak, his belongings and the enchanted mace resting in a bag by the rock's base. Flanking the stream were lit braziers placed on short wooden poles warming the area, giving the man some warmth and comfort while he sat there idly sharpening his greatsword with a whetstone. His mind was fixed on his own thoughts. The nightmares he had suffered, though twisted to fuel his dread, were not untrue. The dying men in his last dream had once been real, once been alive. The adrenaline of war, of total war, when tactics had failed and strategies weren't followed, it made him forget what was actually happening around him. In the grove, the better part of life he'd been a mercenary, fighting for someone else's worthy cause, for the promise of gold. The desert he'd seen, littered with war engines and writhing bodies, had been in the land of Pune. He'd fought for the Camelon Crusaders, intent on liberating the holy cities that lay beyond the Forbidden Desert. But Pune had made it clear that the holy cities were theirs, and had unleashed their own crusade to wipe Camelon out of their lands. Camelon, like countless other times, had failed in their conquest. Whereas Camelon was good at raising armies, Pune was just as good at ending them. And that battle he dreamt, that bloody battle of Tisa Fortress, had proven just how much Camelon was out of their depths. Randall could not help but tremble as he stared at his own reflection in the stream. He saw himself back in that sun-struck land, surrounded, fires about, bodies writhing in deathly agony, looking at him as he ran, pleading to be taken with him. Then there was the sorcerer. Upon a flying carpet he sat, as he'd flown about scorching the earth with fire born from recitations in the book he carried. How he laughed as he said the same words again and again as men begged for death or mercy. That one word he knew: burn. He broke before himself in the stream, trembling with hate and shame as he felt himself relive those dark younger days. It was just then he watched a figure appear beside his reflection, drab and black and with a jewel-encrusted turban. Dark and menacing. He turned around. The sorcerer! Randall turned around to see that very man stand beside him now, his eyes glinting the same malice as it did then. Randall leapt instinctively at him, pinning him to the moss-ridden ground by the stream, and put his hands on his throat, choking him. The sorcerer looked on wide-eyed, clawing at Randall's face and neck as he squeezed tighter. In that moment, Randall felt a reckoning. All thoughts of time and place had gone. only rage. He was in teaser now, exacting revenge. He'd often fought for gold, but for this monster, he'd kill him for free. The sorcerer's brown skin grew purple, and his hands grew weaker around Randall's wrist, and he began to mutter incoherent words. He was almost dead, Randall thought furiously. He'll hurt none of my brothers anymore, until the sorcerer stopped muttering and let go of him. And Randall felt a blast of wind propel him backwards, making him tumble over the rock and fall into the stream. The depth of the stream wasn't deep, but the alarming shock of the cold water shook him out of his rage. Crawling out of the water onto the opposite side of the stream, Randall caught his breath. Not from the water, but he hadn't realized he'd been choking on his own bottled rage. What had happened? Where was the sorcerer? Maker preserve me, Randall swore to himself. Osmund lay on the other side, staggering upwards, wheezing as he caught his own breath, clutching at his neck. I'm... Hell's below. What happened?
It's close, Tara. It's fed, it knows people are here.
But I didn't even sleep. I was just with my own thoughts. I thought it fed only on dreams.
I am unsure. This is most concerning. The wards are meant to shield us from its power.
Damn it all. Are you all right?
Yes. I came to give you this flask. Martinetal potion. It should resist the power of the Fae. I'd made some for myself and our friends over there, expected you to be on Nightbelly tonight, but here, take it. I've drunk mine.
The potion was in a corked-glassed conical flask, and looked luminous orange. Randall took it gingerly, and looked at it. His mind still confused from the horrible hallucination. His own thoughts had come alive. A shadow from a single memory had become a reality, and in reacting impulsively, like one in a dream, he had almost killed the very man who'd saved him. He was pent with a sudden shame and anger. This man had just saved his life, and he had tried to kill him. The humiliation. Randall frowned at his very being. Worthless, landless, a nobody. What was his purpose in life but to kill and steal? He could never change that. He will never change. And now a fugitive and an outlaw. No future, no family. About to sob, he realized finally he was master of nothing. Shame began to boil to simmering anger, until... Ow! Oh! My head! Ah! Osmund! Oh.
Drink the potion, man.
Rubbing his temple where Osmund had clubbed him with his staff, he quickly uncorked the flask and drank the liquid, with a distasteful metallic aftertaste. Randall made a grimace before laying the flask down. Within seconds, his thoughts began to clear, focus, the train of odd and heavy emotions disappearing like ash in the wind. He was now fully in the grove, and in the present. It was quiet. Yet, Osmund, Randall, and the animals stood erect as a chill suffocated the air.
Come now. Let me in. A morsel of your mind is all I seek.
Randall rubbed his forehead as he felt a horrible, invasive power besiege his mind. The monster was trying again, forcefully, but the potion, and with possible help from the wards, weakened it.
Oh, you! Such memories, such minds, such fertile ground to breed fear.
Randall had grabbed the enchanted mace and ran to Osmund, who was standing defensively, his staff at the ready. One hand on his staff and the other facing outwards, clearly a fighting stance.
Where the hell is it?
As in response, commotion could be heard on the other side of the grove, where it was darkest, and then what looked to be a volley of stones flew up and landed before where the two men stood. No, not stones. It was the remains of the toad and the pine marten. Next was the horrific screaming of the stag, who came speeding into view to the right side of the men. His muzzle was a bashed-up bloody mess, and entire strokes of his skin and fur had been flayed apart. Bits of it hung loosely as he spun about, in wild circles, the mortal madness of agony racking him apart.
Exquisite. Thank you summoned me. Raw mortals are the best. I'll feast well this night.
The stag clamoured drunkenly on the grass now, the pain making the poor beast whimper and convulse. From where the stag had emerged came the fox, its muzzle red and clattered with flesh, its eyes a hollow abyss of black, shrouding yellow pupils. It looked twice as big now, and the skin beneath the fur seemed to bulge sporadically like 100 heartbeats.
How it feels to play in the minds of mortals once again.
The creature suddenly sprinted towards the two men, Randall being the closest, with a freakish quickness. As it leapt close, the effects of the terror seemed to instinctively affect both Randall and Osmund. Osmund touched his temple and cast a defensive shield, before staggering back, the shield being nothing more than a translucent bubble that expanded from his staff outwards before bursting into nothingness. A reactionary spell. Randall, who had only a potion and a mortal blade at his defense, growled in rage as he felt a shadowy hand caress his mind, prodding it. Before he knew it, the mutating fox had leapt up and bit on his left leg with an immense power. The skin of his leg was being shorn off, the tough fabric covering his legs proving to be no hard task for the monster to tear through. In the pain, he felt the shadow in his mind grow. Even with the potion, it was feeding off his fright and panic, weakening his mind and defenses to its influence as it skinned him. He heard it speak in his head.
Open your mind. Let me defile and devour what rot you hide.
The terror stopped tearing Randall's skin, its own skin bulging like 1,000,000 beetles scuttling within. It bared its teeth at Osmund as the druid fired another dark spell at it, this time making it recoil and react by charging Osmund instantly. Osmund was overwhelmed to react with another spell as the creature pounced on him, making them tumble on the ground together. The hungry beast slavered as it began to do the same as it had done to Randall and the stag, ripping him apart. But Osmund, wearing many layers to his dark robes, each one flapping wildly in the beast's snarling face, which only angered it and made it howl in rage. Just enough time for Osmund to roll over and reach for his staff. After reciting a quick spell, Randall turned to see roots from the earth burst up and wrap around the fox, its face now an alien mask of rage and hate. The roots bound themselves to the legs and neck of the beast, twisting and tightening about. The beast only screamed louder as it writhed to break free.
Randall, now! Kill it!
The fox was no more, nor were the vines that had held it. They had snapped. Now something truly maddening stood in its place. It was a grey-skinned thing, the skin itself wet and smooth. It was the size of a pony and had the body of a pig, except no tail, and its feet were reptilian claws. Its head was nothing more than a gaggle of writhing tentacles, which from within was a single gigantic, lidless eye. It made the most obscene noises, this creature from hell trying to communicate in the mortal world. But alas, the enchanted weapon had weakened the creature. No more did its skin bulge, instead its smooth back was bleeding a black-purple ichor from Randall's barrage of blows. Osmund was on the ground, face flat and exhausted from spending his willpower on casting such powerful spells within a short time. Randall was lying on his side, gritting his teeth as he shivered at the sight of the creature. He felt a horrible sense of hopelessness consume him. Suddenly, shadows from the past, of creeping terrors in his youth, began to appear within his periphery. Gigantic black spiders running on the grove walls, a torturer with a saw waiting by a rack near the sundial, a headless woman nailed to a tree with her limbs twisted apart, beckoning Randall to join her in agonizing reverie. Doubt weighed heavily on him as he saw the beast roar in triumph, its single eye fixed on him until Randall found his spirit breaking. Even as the terror crept to Osmund, Randall felt nothing but choking fear.
No! Osmund! Osmund! I'm sorry!
The terror looked around back at Randall as he neared Osmund, the eye crippling his will as the nightmares began to talk, scream, and laugh. His nightmares were being born.
Yes, cry and bawl. That's it. I'll squeeze you dry of fear. But I wonder what exquisite dread your friend has. Let's take a look.
It turned around to look down at the unconscious druid, and its tentacles began to wrap around his head. Osmund began to squirm, as no doubt that eye was rummaging in Osmund's mind, pilfering his thoughts, feeding off only the worst, and concentrating them. Randall could see to his horror the creature begin to somewhat heal in its back as it did so. And then it recoiled heavily, as if it too had been hit with a shockwave, though this was no spell. It landed on its back, dazed for a moment in shock, and Randall, breaking from the spell, could hardly believe his eyes. It was the stag. Though injured, it had found courage to save the men from their doom by kicking the terror with such force from Osmund. In that moment, Randall sensed all nightmares dissipate into nothingness, the fright instantly leaving him. This was his moment, his only chance. He staggered up, drooling savagely, making sure not to look at its eye. His back was hunched as he took 3 steps toward the creature, which was already beginning to twitch back into consciousness. He swung his mace and aimed down, right for the eye, the moment it was about to look up. He swung with such ferocity that all thought left him. He just hammered the beast with swing after swing until its head was mush.
It matters not. I've seen your soul, Randall Blackstone. I'll see you again. Of that, you can be sure.
The terror's voice left as he delivered the final death blow. His arm gone completely weak, sending this fey beast back into the abyss of hell. And he found that he himself was beginning to fall into darkness. Warm sunlight greeted him from the dark voyage between dreams and the return to life. The smell of citrus and mint reached his nose. Randall awoke on a bed beside the stream, where on the opposite side of the stream lay the stag, his eyes well shut as a blanket hid the bandages around his skin. Osmund sat at his table a few feet away, busy writing scrolls with a focused look, and further to the right was the clumps of flesh that were the remains of the terror. A few minutes later they sat opposite each other at the table, eating a humble meal of hot stew and freshly squeezed apple juice from his grove. Though both had rested, their minds were still drained, and Osmund assured the sweetness of the apple would restore life back to the brain. After breaking their fast, Randall would be gone to continue his journey home. Already his gear and weapons were on him. Even the mace was now slung on his side. For the majority of the morning, they were silent. Randall was lost in his thoughts, while Osmund was writing letter after letter. Finally, Randall turned to Osmund and broke the calm quiet with a low voice. Last night, the creature spoke to me before I killed it. It said it'd see me again. Osmund, was that thing really from hell?
So sages say, but none can ever find out. It's not on the sacred texts, and it is classified as a fae, not a fiend. Fae are often lovers of trickery. I wouldn't concern yourself with its words. It's gone.
There are some nights I think I am going to hell. War is different to murder, of course. And I've lived the life I wanted, but I don't think it was the one I needed. I've killed people for coin, Osmund. I thought it was for glory, honor, and even one time for chivalry. I lied to myself. Since the age of 14, I told myself it was for the greater good. In reality, it was just to share a drink with outlaws. I thought being a man meant killing another. And if I'd been born in a war-torn land like Caramand, perhaps that'd be true. But I grew up in Humberland. I had a choice. And in time, I will be punished for it.
Oh, there is no saint without a sin in his book. You are human, and you must learn to live with the past. That thing lived on fear. And though I know not your life, I would not put you in the same black pot as other sellswords. You have the courage to fight an armored ogre and a night terror. No amount of gold would make even a dying sellsword do the same. You saved my life. But if your misspent youth haunts you so, consider this a moment to change your ways. I have placed my soul in the care of Mother Nature, though I know that no priest can absolve your sins. No man can carry them from you. You still have time, lad. Time to change.
But it seems trouble is all I attract. I'll see what I can do.
We can but try, at least. But I wouldn't be so sure to lay your blade in place for a hoe. Look here. Found it on the underbelly of the Terror before it decayed. It's a wizard's brand. This creature was no dweller of the forest. It was conjured and set loose.
Why? And why here?
I know not, but I am writing to the circles in Coromant to be wary. Randall, the magic used to summon such a creature, is ancient, powerful and dark. Moreover, it was able to pass through my wards and my potions. It must have been enhanced. If there is someone out there conjuring forgotten terrors like this, then there is a darkness brewing that has been hitherto veiled to us. But alas, leave such worries to me. This is a matter of the arcane. Be wary on the road today, Randall. I will send a raven to watch over you until Roarpool village. If it cries out, turn back.
Never knew the way home would be this troublesome.
Well, if you're heading into Coromant, I feel your troubles may only begin. Why don't you head south and take a boat to Camelot? It's safer there.
South means the Republic. I'm a wanted man there. If you don't know, then you will in time. But I'll take my chances with Coromant. Thank you, Osmund, and take it easy. I hope we meet again.
Under better circumstances, I hope.
Randall somberly rose from his stool and hefted up his belongings over his back, and made his way up the winding path to where the gate lay, while Osmund, just behind him, went to the side and pulled on a rope connected to a well-concealed pulley system in which the large gate opened sideways. After saying their farewells, Randall stood out the grove and looked about him. The polar sea was an icy blue beneath the bright autumn morning sky. In the horizon was what appeared to be a ship making its way to some distant port. He walked on further away from the grove until he reached what looked to be the remains of a brick road. But like most roads in the mudland borders, it was heavily overgrown with plant life. Homeward bound along the path, Randall walked. The sellsword grunted to himself as he found himself walking into a land that, last he knew, was slowly tearing itself apart. Coromant had never been a land for peaceful men, but Camelot was too far and too heavily guarded, and the Republic of Barentine was presumably on high alert for a 6'6" bald man from Humberland. No doubt they were already sending search parties. He sighed to himself as he walked along that empty path, flanked by bare trees. What adventures awaited him? What horrors?